Okay, let's take a look at section 18.5, aspect and time in tenses. I think Duff very wisely points out that this is definitely a matter of ongoing debate among scholars. And I like the way he steers a middle ground, that maybe it's not all about aspect, but it's not all about time either. He points out that there are three time distinctions. We can either talk about an event that happened in the past, something that is happening in the present, or something that will happen in the future. And there are three aspects. So the action can be in progress. The action can be undefined. We're just referencing it. We don't really care how long it took, and whether it's ongoing. And the action can be finished, completed. And these tenses function differently in the different moods. So the indicative generally has an element of time, but also an element of aspect. The participles have a sense of relative time relative to the main verb. And other moods only have to do with aspect. Now, I do want to bring in one more point to complicate things, and it's not something I can really explain to you except to mention that this fits into this discussion as well. It's another one of those elements that's on my list to read more about, but it's the idea of stative verbs versus action verbs. There's a difference between saying, um, I, oh, I should have come up with examples before I started recording. I am running and I am sick, right? I am running is actually an action that I'm engaged in. But I am sick, even though in Greek that's going to be a regular verb, it's a verb that describes my state, that doesn't describe what it is that I'm doing. And I know that some of the discussions about time versus aspect suggest that stative verbs work differently than action verbs. I just want you to be aware that that conversation is happening. And at some point, if you want to get deeper into Greek grammar, you'll want to look that up and find out more about it. For now, though, let's just at least look at what Duff tells us. I like this chart here where we have in the indicative, when we have a present indicative verb, we know that this is something that's happening in the present and it's something that's ongoing. It might also be undefined. The indicative future, that tells us that this action is something that's going to happen in the future. And that's all. It doesn't really tell us anything about the aspect of the action. If you have an indicative imperfect, it's something that happened in the past and it was a process. You know, the aspect is something that was ongoing for a while at least. And in the indicative aorist, this is also something that happened in the past, but here there's nothing about aspect. It's undefined. It just happened. Whatever. In the indicative perfect, sorry, Duff has present in parentheses because it has an effect on the present. But it is an action that's completed in the past. Participles, a present participle is something that happens simultaneously with the main verb. So you can have a present participle and an aorist main verb, and that present participle is going to be translated in English with a past tense because the present participle tells you that this thing was happening at the same time as what's going on with the main verb, but both of them happened in the past because the main verb is aorist. Um, you can also have an aorist participle that often tells you that there's a sequence. You have the aorist action, participle action that happened first, and the main verb happened after that. Now, these are not hard and fast rules with participles. Sometimes you get an aorist participle and an aorist main verb, and it seems more like the two aorists are happening at the same time. So don't again, this is one of those examples where translate it that way first as a sequence. Present tense happened at the same time, aorist happened in a sequence. If that makes no sense, especially if it's possible that the participle refers to a time rather than an aspect, consider that possibility. So it's better to teach you relative time first, because that's more often what happens. But you should know that that's not a hard and fast rule, and that language is fluid and sometimes there's something else going on. Finally, for imperatives, infinitives, and subjunctives, Duff didn't mention this when we studied subjunctives, but subjunctives work just like infinitives and imperatives. Expect to find aorist subjunctives, aorist infinitives, and aorist imperatives, because that's the normal, undefined way to use the verb. But if you find a present imperative, a present infinitive, or a present subjunctive, suspect that there's something else going on, that the author wants to tell you something about the ongoing nature of this action. That's pretty much it. Be sure and read this section for yourself, and let me know if you have any questions.